Hello and welcome to the Reddit League preview show, introducing Season 6 to you all. Now you might be thinking, where's Satomo? Satomo has decided in sort of the off-season that he wants to, take a bit of a step back from hosting the shows because he just wasn't enjoying it as much anymore and focus more on the casting part, which he does still enjoy a lot. And so I will be taking over his hosting and he'll be doing more of the casting. I'll still do some casting as well occasionally, but I might also do a little bit less of that. We've got some great new casters that might be doing the odd match here and there. What won't change is that we'll still have a guest every week, and today's guest is Jake. Hi, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Super cool to be here. Thanks for having me, and hopefully I can do my best to fill in for Satomo today.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. And well, you probably will be filling in for me, in fact, and I'll be filling in for Satomo. We'll have to get used to that. But
Right.
yeah, so let me just quickly summarize what Reddit League is all about. If you've just randomly stumbled upon this video and have no idea, I'm gonna assume you still at least know about Geoguessr, because otherwise this is all not gonna make any sense to you. But Reddit League is basically a tournament where a lot of players, I think we're up to almost 80 this season, probably around like 95 if you include like the Reddit League Next, play against each other in 1v1 games over the course of 9 to 11 weeks on different maps. And essentially, Division 1, the top players, the top 4 will go into a playoff bracket at the end to determine the one winner. That's the basic gist of it. There is a rule document that details all of that we don't have the time to explain for right now, that you can also look up in the Reddit post, for example, but I think I'll also link the document in the video description. Now, to quickly talk about what changed from last season. There wasn't really a whole lot that needed to be changed. There were a few slight clarifications that I made in the rules, but other than that, the main change is this. We've reduced the timers. Basically, the timers are still like an old thing coming all the way back from season 1. They haven't changed in basically 2.5 years or so at this point. And they come from a time where it was still usual, to play these 5-minute games. And in the meantime, players have gotten a lot better, and 3 minutes has been sort of the established, everything revolves around that timer. So while I didn't, just want to cut it all down and say like everything's going at 3 minutes, because that would kind of just, mean a whole lot of other things would need to change to tell divisions apart. But I thought, let's make the timers a bit shorter and let's see how it goes. So basically, it went from having 30 seconds difference between each division to just having 20 seconds between each division. What do you think about that, Jake?
I'm not super opinionated on it, really, one way or the other. I mean, it's going to be a little tougher to play with 4 minutes instead of 4:30, but I think maybe a good thing to sort of get used to having a little bit more time pressure. So I don't really mind the change.
Yeah, I imagine it can't hurt, especially if you kind of want to get promoted anyway. You're going to have to get used to the shorter timers eventually, and might as well start right now, I guess. Also,
Yep.
kindly related, that's not really. Anyway, sort of related to some of the last season's maps being very easy with sort of a 5-minute timer. We saw some weeks where like most of Division 5 25k the games might have had something to do with the maps, but also with a little bit of a shorter timer, we might be seeing less of that and more sort of, just things not coming down to those very slight margins that can always just end up on the wrong side very quickly. Anyway, now that we've talked about the small rule changes, let's look at all the maps we've got for this season. The map pool distribution is pretty much the same as last season, whereas, you kind of got one map from, 3 world maps, 2 Europe maps, 2 Asia maps, 1 Africa, Australia, New Zealand map, 1 US, Canadian state, 1 continent, and I don't know why Satomo said Americas. I'm not sure that is actually what I call the map pool. But anyway, so we're starting off the season with Finland, then going over to Bhutan. Our first world map of the season is going to be 1 location per city/town. Then Argentina, Virginia for the US state, Lithuania, the diverse AI world, South America, South Africa, the UAE, and then remote world to finish off the regular season. What do you think about the map pool in general, Jake?
It's an interesting one. First of all, just for clarification for myself, for the divisions with 10 people who play just 9 games, are there playoffs on maps 10 and 11, or are there playoffs when everyone else's are?
Their playoffs are when everyone else's are, yeah.
So what you're saying is I don't have to worry about UAE or remote world.
That is generally correct, except
Okay.
as it is since last season, players in playoff situations in the 10-player divisions, as well as in, the 12-player divisions as well, can choose from the existing maps, from the maps that were played for during the regular season for their best of 3 games. So maybe if they end up in the map pool for that, and players do choose them, you might have to worry about them, but you won't have to worry about them during the regular season.
Okay, well, that's good to know because I don't really like the idea of either of those maps, so I'm pretty happy about that. Otherwise, it's interesting. I mean, I think the one location per city town being like an urban map, I think that's the type of map that's going to benefit from the shorter time limits because it might be the type of map where a lot of people are going to figure it out relatively quickly. So yeah, I think maybe that's a good change for maps like that. Otherwise, I don't know. I'm not like super thrilled or super dejected about the distribution. There's a few that I don't like very much. South Africa is a country I always struggle in. It's going to require a lot of practice to figure that one out. Bhutan, I have no experience. I'm quite bad at Bhutan, so that's going to be a tough one. But then, I think Virginia's not so bad as U.S. states go. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. Yeah. Otherwise, I mean, yeah, pretty neutral. Honestly, I think it's going to take a lot of practice for me to do well this season, but I think I can pull it off. And I don't really hate any of the countries, so it should be a fun one.
Yeah, we can talk more about your chances once we get to your division. Just a few more words about the map pool. I was just looking over the maps, and I thought this is actually like a super difficult map pool if we're talking about getting perfect games, because not a lot of those maps are actually easy to pinpoint. Like if you just think about Finland, I mean, we are playing the intersection guesser map, but there's a lot of rural locations in Finland that won't be that easy. Bhutan, it's going to take an insane amount of luck with the map choice, the seed choice, and with, just your gameplay to be able to 25k Bhutan. Argentina isn't overly easy just because it's a pretty big country with some very long empty roads. Virginia, I honestly have not too much of an idea about, but American states can also sometimes be a bit tricky. Lithuania is not particularly easy to 25k just because it has quite a lot of difficult, not super rural locations, but locations on roads that don't have a lot of reference points, kind of similar to the other Baltic states. The world maps, could be whatever, but South America as well is a very difficult continent, probably the most difficult one, I'd even say. And yeah, as you said, South Africa as well, always a tough country to play. And even if you look at the 12-player divisions, the UAE is also not easy to pinpoint at all. And remote world is just, a remote world. It takes an easy seed for any chances of a 25k there, and even that is probably unrealistic. So it'll actually be very interesting to look at how many perfect games we see this season. I definitely take a bet that we'll see less than last season.
Wouldn't be surprised. And I still haven't managed a perfect game in any Reddit League game, so I'm not sure it's going to happen this season either, unless I get a lucky seed. But I am glad I don't have to play UAE for that reason, because I can't stand pinpointing there. I find it so annoying.
That might be a good thing for you though, then as well, where you may not get a perfect score, but you can probably expect others to also not get perfect scores, and that might come into your favor as well.
Yeah, quite possibly.
All right, then after talking about the maps, let's move on to the actual divisions. And for this season, I thought let's make a bit of a switch up. We've always done it the way that we started with Division 1 and then kind of went through the divisions all the way down. And this season, we're going to do it differently. We're going to start with Reddit League next. And here we've got our 15 players who unfortunately didn't quite manage to get into the, I think it was top 24 of the preseason positions to get a spot in the regular divisions. But they've still got plenty of chances to show their worth essentially over the course of the season, and 11 weeks of some difficult maps. And as always, well, I say as always, we started this last year, but as last time as well, we don't quite know yet how many of these spots will be enough to qualify. I'm gonna say it's gonna be at least 3, but we'll see. Maybe there'll be even more spots open. But yeah, what do you think about these players? Do you recognize any of them? Do you think someone might be your favorite for this?
Tough one to call. There's a few names that I recognize from either previous seasons or from other places, but it's the hardest one to call for me because I just don't have a good sense of how good these players are really. We've seen Bombadil and Clemens, Clemens in Reddit League before, and I think they played decently well. So they're definitely, I think, favorites for me to finish pretty high. And then a couple, I think Secator is a good player to watch. Pretty strong French player and one of the higher finishers in the qualifiers. So could see him making some noise. Otherwise, really not sure. I mean, anyone here could surprise us. I think a lot of the people lower in, are these ordered actually? I guess
No,
they're not ordered.
They're not ordered.
Screen. Okay. Well, yeah, a lot of the players in here there's a pretty big disparity, is what I'm trying to say, between the points of like the highest qualifiers versus the lowest one. So I think there are a few people who are definitely going to struggle in here. But anyone could surprise us, and that's part of what's fun about this Reddit League next. So yeah, excited to see how it plays out.
Yeah, for sure. Just to visualize that, the difference between Bombadil, who finished in 25th and was just 1,400 points off, essentially, of coming back into the regular Reddit League divisions, and Li Chi-meng, who finished in 39th with 45,000 points. There's a 40,000 point difference there, which is quite big. And I guess you could probably expect you could take about 7, 8, 9 of those people and say they've probably got a decent chance to actually fight for the promotion spots, in a way, if you want to call it promotion. The rest of them are probably just here to, get used to Reddit League, get used to the format, get used to playing these country-specific maps, for example, which is something a lot of people don't regularly do, and just kind of get a feel about everything and gather some experience. And then they can probably think about actually qualifying maybe in the next preseason, maybe in the next Reddit League next, if they're enjoying playing at all, which is always the most important part. But yeah, it can definitely be an interesting Reddit League next this season. I'm assuming it probably won't be as ridiculously close as last one was, with the top 2 separated by 2 points after 11 weeks. But we can hope maybe they'll be separated by 1 point this time. But now that we're finished with Reddit League next, we'll move over into the regular divisions, and we'll start off with Division 5B that you can see here. And that includes 5 players who are still here from last season, as well as 7 newcomers. And yeah, Jake, what do you think about this one?
So as always, I feel like I say this every season probably, but I like Donny Blance a lot. He's a player who has been, seems like, in Division 5 for as long as I can remember, but it seems like he's one of the better players every time, and then somehow misses promotion every time. But especially, is there an extra promotion spot here in Division 5
yes,
compared to before?
Yeah,
Okay.
I should have talked about this during the
Mhm.
rule changes, to be fair. Yes, slight interlude here. There is one more rule change in a sense here, where it's not like any specific rule changed, but the promotion and relegation spots shifted a bit. Where previously the way it worked was always, you'd have like 3 relegation spots in Division 1, and then you'd have 3 promotion spots in Division 2. Now, what that led to was, with some people always just, have other things to do, real life commitments that they just can't continue into the next season. So there'd be spots open, and they would have to be filled with preseason players. And there's always the slight worry, or just the general, idea that the newcomers won't always be of, the best quality, I guess, in the sense that you can't really judge whether they'll be a good fit for that division, especially in sort of like the higher divisions. And to combat that a bit, I've decided that from now on, we're basically having more promotion spots in the lower division than the upper division has relegation spots. Now that works out in that Division 1 has 2 relegation spots, Division 2 has 3 promotion spots. And it kind of works like that for all of the division. The one lower down has one more promotion spot than comes down from the upper division. Now, how that is actually going to play out if at some point no one leaves from a division, I'll think about when we get there. But so far, it's never happened. And if we have to have a 13-player division, 14-player division, we'll manage. But that seems like the best way to, kind of push up players a bit through divisions, as especially lower down in Division 4 and Division 5. Because there's so many players, it felt a bit frustrating maybe, but also just generally very difficult to get out of. And that should maybe alleviate that a bit. So while last season there was only one direct promotion spot in the Division 5s, there are now 2 direct promotion spots, and there is also still the promotion playoff spot. The graphic's still slightly wrong there. We'll get it fixed. But only third place actually goes into the promotion playoff against the other division's third place. So there's just one game. There's no longer like a semifinal and a final and only one player gets out of it. There's one best of 3 to get a 5th person promoted from Division 5B. Back to the players.
Yeah, so with the extra promotion spot, I could definitely see Danny Blondes pushing for that. Other than that, I think I like Cougars as kind of a newcomer. I mean, I think the newcomers might struggle a little bit in the higher divisions, but I could see them performing pretty well in these lower divisions. And Cougars being the top finisher among the newcomers in the preseason, as well as a pretty active member in my community, actually. I think definitely a favorite for me, or certainly somebody to watch. And then otherwise, I think the French players, Arnaud and Lagege, also pretty strong preseason finishes, so you could definitely see them making some noise. And then maybe Trebliha also had a tough time of it in my division in I think it was 4B last season, but maybe a little more at home in Division 5, and I could definitely see her putting in some good performances as well.
Yeah, I think Division 5 is, I say this every season, but is getting even more interesting. You already mentioned quite a few players. Danny Blondes, for sure, he's kind of always been, ever since he's joined Reddit League, around that playoff area, just about not getting promoted. And maybe it's finally his season. You mentioned Cougars as well, Lagege, no. I think all of them have pretty good chances. Who I also wanted to point out, though, especially is Mr. Swiss Snow, who was actually well on course for like maybe even a Division 2 or Division 3 spot until the last week of the preseason in Pennsylvania, where he got like 8,000 points and dropped all the way down to Division 5. So maybe not the highest hopes for him in Virginia, but except for that, he might also be a player to really look out for and see what he can do. And yeah, apart from that, always got to look out for the players who've kind of now gotten to grips with it, like who had their first season last season. So Cephalin, for example, who finished 5th last season, is also a candidate who might now, with a little bit more knowledge about how everything works, maybe a little bit more practice now that he's used to it, might be able to perform quite good and might be challenging for those promotion spots. Now,
yeah, speaking of Cephalin, actually, just very quickly, I think I've seen him in the offseason. He's played in Harriers League and a couple other leagues, and he's very good, and I think he's played a lot in the offseason, so that's definitely another person to watch.
Yeah, he did also mention to me, like, in one of the Reddit comments about, how he felt it's slightly unfair that, if a Reddit League next player can play in preseason next season, why he's not allowed, for example, to get promoted into Division 2, because he could have, practiced a lot during the off season and become that much better. He might have been talking a bit about himself there, now that you say that. But yeah, definitely an interesting candidate as well. So let's take a quick look at their fixtures for week number 1. And yep, certainly some interesting games there. Mr. Swiss Snow against Cougars, for sure. Danny Blondes against Lagege. Definitely some interesting ones in there. Soundbite against Penguin also. They had some interesting game. well, one interesting game, I guess, last season. They know each other. So yeah, what do you think about that first week?
Some interesting fixtures in here. Probably not too much for me to add, but yeah, definitely. I like. I didn't catch the whole thing about Mr. Swiss Snow having trouble in Pennsylvania, but looks like definitely a quality player outside the U.S. at least. So that'll be a very, very good matchup to watch. And also Treblinka against Zetterlin. I'm not sure how that's going to go, but I think that's another fun one.
Yeah, for sure. Then let's move on to Division 5A, where we have essentially 4 players from Division 5 last season, as well as both of the players from Reddit League Next who got promoted into the regular divisions this season. The third player who would have also gotten promoted just, never said anything once I pinged him, so he's not here, but the other 2 are here in Hodileft and Strausel, however he wants to be pronounced. That's also a good thing to say right now, I guess. If there are any if your name here written on that sheet is not the name you'd like to be used, or if we are just mispronouncing any of your names, please let us know. We can change it. So Toma can change it. And yeah, a very interesting division to me. What does this one tell you?
This one might even be a little bit tougher for me. Just to have any idea for who I like. I think Jack Jackie S is a fairly obvious favorite, as I think he was in the playoff final last season and didn't quite make it. Another player to watch for me is Clemu. Similar deal with Zetterlin. I've seen Clemu quite a lot in the offseason, playing other leagues and challenges. Definitely a very good no-moving player, and maybe had a little bit of trouble in the preseason, maybe with a couple of the seeds, but definitely has the quality. And then another interesting one for me is Apphaloxid, who was lower down in the qualifying in the preseason. But I know for a fact that he's extremely good at Indonesia, and he's learned all the Kabupaten and stuff. So definitely a player who is willing to put in effort and time into learning things. And if he continues to do that, maybe for other places, then he might develop into a really strong player.
Yeah, just a shame for him that we're not playing Indonesia this season. But
of course,
that being said, we haven't actually played Indonesia at all, so it's still very much a possibility for any future seasons. And then at a point where he's gotten used to the league, so it might be a good thing for him to, not get it out of the way this season and rather save it. But yeah, in general, quite a few players I know from this one, actually, even ignoring, the players who were already here last season. As you said, Jack, definitely one of the favorites. But I'm also very interested to see how Mr. Fish will do, because he was in Reddit League before. He participated in Season 4, I'm pretty sure, and got relegated at that point. Didn't really quite get enough performance out of himself there. Just never really looked competent enough in a way, as harsh as that may sound. But he did very, very well in preseason this time and was very close to even, finishing in a position that would have technically qualified him for a higher division. Because he's previously been here and gotten relegated out of Division 5, he wouldn't have been allowed to, start in Division 4 or higher anyway. But finished the best in preseason out of anyone from the Division 5 players. So it's definitely interesting to see how much he will have improved in the meantime, or whether preseason was just, a bit of a lucky streak in terms of the maps. I also think Pikatost might be an interesting one to look at. Did average, I'd say, in preseason. Played against him before in Liga Antakumu. I'll just be interested to see how he does. Also, as I said, with the other division, Division 5, be interesting to see how the players who are now in the second season do, the likes of Biquet, Dukmir, who did decently last season, but didn't quite manage to get into the playoffs. And yeah, as you said, Clemu, also a very interesting player. And just personally, I'm also looking forward to seeing how the players from Reddit League Next will end up doing this season, now that they're in one of the regular divisions. And so let's take a quick look at their fixtures for week 1. But before we do that, just one quick word. I don't think Chris RS is actually in that division, because I think he was the one who would have finished first in NXT and just, never applied. And I'm just trying to
Yeah, are we
figure
missing
out. Yeah,
Sky
we're
Blue
missing we're
Paramount
missing
and
Sky
Blue?
Blue. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, I'll ask Satomo to do that, and hopefully you're gonna see the correct version. But yeah, he's also gonna be just interesting to see. He's been here for quite a while now. Avoided relegation last season. We'll see how he does this season. And let's take a look at those fixtures. What do you think about those?
Speaking of how will the Reddit League next players do, we've got a clash between them in week one. So that will definitely be an interesting match to keep track of. Other than that, the Swiss Derby as well, Mr. Fish against Clemu. We talked a little bit about both of them. So definitely a very, very interesting matchup. And yeah, can't wait for some of these.
Yeah, I also think Jack against Sukmir could be pretty interesting. I think, let me just quickly check that, but I had in my head that Dukmir got a yellow card last season, but I gotta see. No, I was wrong actually. He might have just had like some very late extensions. But yeah, they were third and fourth in the same division last season, so that could also be quite a interesting matchup. Technically, the two highest finishers out of last season that are still here and didn't get promoted. And yeah, as you pointed out, the NXT matchup definitely interesting, and technically two newcomer matchups here in Abflugseed against Greasy Church Killer. Yes, please tell me how to pronounce that if you're listening. I have no idea. And Keith against Picatost as well. It'll be interesting to see how the newcomers do in their first game against each other. Now, let's move on to Division 4B, and we've got a familiar name here, Jake. What do you think about this one?
Boy, this is going to be fun. I mean, I have no idea how this is going to go. I don't know. There's so many good players here. I think it's really balanced, all in all, in terms of skill level. Is kind of what I see when I look at this division. I could see anyone coming out on top here. The newcomers are scary. Sheldon and Ollie are both really, really good. I played Ollie in Map Battle League, and he gave me a really, really good match. And then Sheldon just destroyed. He played so well last season in Division 5, and he's also a good friend of mine. So it's going to be super cool to see him and play him and see how he does. But yeah, I could see anyone coming out on top or on bottom of this division. I have absolutely no idea. I'm going to try my best. I think it's I think it's my season every season, and it never is. But I really think I have a chance here. But I need to play. I mean, you need to be at the top of my game the whole time to have any shot.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm so looking forward to both Division 4s actually this season, because they both look so interesting with a lot of very good players at very similar skill levels. And as you said, there's like at least 7 or 8 players here where if you tell me, okay, they got promoted, I'd be like, yeah, sure, of course. It'll be interesting as well to see, for me especially, how Seppo's going to do, because he's now essentially been in a relegation fight for I think like 4 seasons running, and he did come out of, I think it was Division 3 all the way back in Season 1. He's one of the old-timers, one of the ones who've been here forever, and got promoted there. So he does know how to get promoted, but yeah, he's not been in a situation like this in a long, long time. So we'll see if he's up for this. I also think another very interesting one is Pastetli, because I know, and you probably do as well. He's practiced a lot in recent times and just played a lot of Geoguessr, and he's definitely a much better player now than he was last season, or especially 2 seasons ago when I think he started in Reddit League. So he's also one that, if everything goes right for him, I could definitely see him coming up with a promotion challenge too. And then, of course, you've got all the favorites. You've got you've got Solar Sensei, I think, is for sure a favorite as well. Sheldon and Ollie definitely can perform at a top level as well. For those two, the biggest change might be just, the time limit, because obviously not only did they get promoted, so it's naturally going to be shorter, but we shortened the time limits this season as well. So they're going from 5 minutes per round to 4 minutes per round, which is a pretty big reduction. And we'll have to see how they handle that. But if they handle it well, they're also players that can definitely fight for the promotion. Mick Peart as well finished 4th last season in Division 4 with 19 points, so also not to be underestimated. We've got Sean Harrison as a newcomer who finished 11th in preseason, which, is not that far down. So always difficult to judge the newcomers, especially in the higher divisions, because it's just rough to be able to tell their level in comparison to everyone else. But definitely also an interesting one to look at. Laban Greb, he's been here for a while, is kind of more so, I think he got promoted like before last season. And then in his first season in Division 4, had like a decent 6th place. So, with now more used to the lower time limits, we'll see if he can maybe fight for that promotion spot as well. So pretty much everything's up for it in this division.
Yeah,
so
completely agree with everything. It's just such an interesting division. At any rate, I will treasure my time at the top of the table, because this may be the only time we see my name there. But
yeah, we'll see. But let's look at the matchups for week 1, where you'll be going up against Stromy. And do you think you can hold on to that number 1 spot with that matchup?
I think I can. It's going to take a good game, obviously, but I think Dromy was one of the weaker players in Division 4 last season, so probably one of my easier matchups, but not taking anything away from him. And it could go either way, of course. And Finland's not a country I feel particularly confident in, so anything can happen there. And then I really like Mick Peart versus Pastetli. Completely agree with what you said about Pastetli. Very definitely an underrated player. Has been playing a lot, and is super, super strong these days. So that's a really, really fun match. Every match in here is really good, but that one in particular I like a lot.
Yeah, that was the one that stood out to me the most as well. I'm also interested in Seppo against Solar Sensei, because as I said, with all of the backstory to Seppo, that'll be an interesting first challenge, because Solar Sensei, very good player, and did make it to the playoffs in last season, and just, ended up not quite making it to the promotion to Division 3, but that's going to be a rough first challenge, and I think a good benchmark into how his season might go. Down at the lower end of this graphic, we've got Laban Greb against Sheldon and Ollie against John Harrison, which also 2 very interesting matchups between players who haven't played against each other in Reddit League before. And again, as we've said, anyone here could make it. So first week can already be a pretty good indication, and pretty good showing of what we might be able to expect from some of these players. And now let's take a look at the other half of Division 4, Division 4A. And I don't think this one's any weaker, is it, Jake?
I wouldn't say so. On average, if anything, it might even be a little stronger. I think I said 4B was very balanced. I want to say this one is maybe a little bit less balanced in terms of skill. I think there's a few players in here who are probably going to struggle. Specifically, I'm looking at Wakelok and Zatomo, who have had tougher seasons in Division 4 in the last couple seasons, but definitely can hold their own, of course, as we've seen. But there's so much quality too at the top, like Carp and Lunacy and Seb Kierst and Harry Emine. I mean, there's so many good players in here. So that fight for the top spots is going to be super intense. Just another super interesting division.
Yeah, definitely. I think Wakelok and Satomo have kind of just been holding on to their Division 4 spot over like the last 2 seasons, I think, where they've just barely managed to make it to not get relegated. But it feels like this season might be rough for them. I guess at minimum, there's probably still going to be one of them, if you kind of include Danny J as well in that kind of trio, I think, which might be the players who kind of try to not get relegated in this season. One of them's probably going to make it, and I think they just have to look at each other and win the direct duels, and that's probably going to be their target. I don't think either of them is really going to be fighting for the promotion spots. And everyone else probably is. I think if you're gonna look at one player who might be a little bit in the middle of all of that, it might be Hedigme. who is definitely a good player, but I think not quite at the same level as some of the others. If you look at Carp, for example, Lunacy, as you said, but even like Hex Alexander, Sepkirs, Teyemine, it'll be interesting if he can really get some good games together and perform at his highest level consistently throughout the season. I think he's got a chance. But if he can't, if he has the odd off game here or there, I think he's probably a player we're looking at finishing around like 6th, 7th. And yeah, it's really hard to pick out and like out and about favorite here though. I'd say probably Carp and Lunacy, just based on what I've seen from them recently. Carp had an insane start to his season last season, then just fell off a little bit at the end and lost in the playoff final at the very end of the season. So he'll definitely be looking to do a little bit better and make that jump to Division 3 this season. And yeah, all overall though, definitely another very strong division. And let's look at their fixtures, which already brings us kind of a first interesting game here with Zatoma against Wakelock. That's a very early but very important game for both of them. What do you think about the rest, Jake?
Yeah, it's absolutely very important. Another game I like a lot is Xander against Danny J. Xander being the only promoted player in this division, and Danny J being the only newcomer. Definitely anything can happen there. I've really no idea who Danny J is, but I mean clearly pretty good to have qualified at this level. So that's a really interesting game. And then every game here is great. I mean, the other three are all just really tight games between super players. Yeah, Carp against Hexalt is a great one. You mentioned Carp with the super strong start last season. I could see him doing it again. He's just so good. And then yeah, Harry Yemine against Lunacy Echo is also a fantastic game. So really looking forward to these.
Yeah, and another interesting point to mention here that I just thought of as well was that Carp benefited a lot last season from getting quite a few perfect games. And as we said, with the probably more difficult to pinpoint maps this season, he might be missing out on a couple points there that he may very well need. He got 4 perfect games last season. I think they were like in his first 5 weeks or something ridiculous like that. Maybe 3 of them were, and then the 4th one came later. But if you exclude those points, he would have been more so in line with Nakiro and Heimini, who finished 4 points below him. So that might be costly for him. We'll have to see. Maybe his pinpointing is just so good that he can even 25k these maps. But that's just an interesting factor there. And yeah, I think, again, similar to Division 4B, a lot of those games will have some very early signs on, what to expect from some players. And it'll put some players on the back foot, which is definitely an interesting psychological factor as well, especially for those who kind of want to get promoted and have the expectation of themselves, such as, for example, Carp, but, maybe Lunacy as well, maybe, Hey Yemine, maybe Sepkist, whoever. If they lose their first game, that might put them in a situation where, the nerves might get to them. And that sometimes can be enough to, have you end up in a position where you might have the skill, but you just can't pull it off at the right time to get your promotion. All right, let's move on to our single file divisions now with Division 3. Just 3 more to go. And, spotted another wrong flag there. All right, 12 players now. And quite a lot of French players. Jake?
Yeah, quite a few. We're seeing, I think generally we're starting to see a lot of French players joining Reddit League. I think, yeah, the players from Ligue 1 Tokumi are starting to sort of discover it and sort of join this community a little bit, which is super cool to see. But there are just so many good players over there. And yeah, this is another really interesting division. Honestly, if I had to pick a favorite here, I might even take like guys like Diesel and Flipster, who were just promoted from Division 4. I don't know if this is just me being biased and thinking Division 4 is stronger than it is because these guys always beat up on me, but they are really good and like have consistently, I think, since they began Reddit League, been always promotion contenders and just super strong players. So honestly, I could still see them thriving and pushing for promotion here. And then I don't know. Yeah, as for the French players, not sure. I mean, Antoine Pilote being a newcomer, not really sure. I think as we get higher in the divisions, I'm guessing the newcomers are going to start to struggle a little bit more, but I'm not sure about that. And then another interesting one is Steal This Nick, who I think had a little bit of trouble getting up from Division 4 and then eventually did and didn't feel like he deserved it. But then last season, Division 3, played really well. I think it was like in the playoffs or something. So
Yep.
definitely another player to watch. Could still make some noise for sure.
Yeah, I might not put too many bets on Flipster in this scenario because he told me he's basically going to be on holiday for the first 3 weeks and might have to play the seeds on like his mobile phone or a laptop with bad internet connection. So
Okay,
maybe not quite the favorite for the promotion this season, but he'll just try to get over those 3 weeks and see what is left over after that, I suppose. Definitely, I agree with Diesel though. He absolutely dominated Division 4 last season with 30 points over the course of 9 games, which is absolutely ridiculous. And that definitely puts him as one of the favorites for Division 3 this time as well, even as a newly promoted player. Will be interesting to see as well if Pastek finally actually does put some practice in that he's been saying for the last 2 seasons, I think, and finally does a little bit and isn't involved in a relegation battle. Also, another very interesting one, I think, is Freckles, who has been in this division now for, I think, the past 2 seasons, might even be 3 now, and he's always around the promotion spots, but hasn't quite managed to get into them. Always has that those one or two off games that stop him from being any higher. But I think with this season's lineup for Division 3, I do think he has a pretty good chance. We generally do have quite a few players in Division 3, more so compared to the other divisions, I feel, that have just been around for ages. You know, we've got Closed, Hugo, Still This Nick, Nakuro, Freckles, of course, who've all been around for many, many seasons. And I think this will be a very interesting season for all of them, to be honest. As you said, Steal This Nick as well, after, not feeling the most comfortable in Division 3, at the start at least of last season. And he did make it to the playoff, promotion playoff, did lose that against Bubat 3-0. But even then, I think all of those 3 games were relatively close. And he just lost all of them by a few hundred points or so. And yeah, of course, the newcomers, as always, also going to be interesting. I think all 3 of them definitely have the level to at least, be competent in this division and fight for some wins here or there. I don't know if any of them have the quality to really be promoted straight away. I've been talking a bit to Geoguessr, and he is putting in quite a bit of practice. He seems like he's taking this seriously and wants to do as well as he can. I don't think I've talked to Antoine Pilote or Tante, but Antoine, I think, took part in from Liga Antakumua quiz events that they organized last week, and his duo team, essentially finished second in that. So he's definitely capable, unless he was being hard carried by his teammate there. But yeah, again, a very interesting division. Also interesting, of course, Paulinho, who's been here for his 3rd season now. I think last season was his 2nd season, if I'm not mistaken. And also always kind of fought around the upper edges of sort of the midfield of Division 3. And it'll be interesting to see if he can finally make that jump into a real promotion challenge. And we'll see about that with their Week 1 games, where we've also got... I'm not sure. It feels wrong, but is that our... No, it's not our first derby. We've had Mr. Fish against Clemu in Division 5. But we haven't had many, it feels like. And here we've got 2, with Flipster against Diesel and Antoine Pilote against Tante.
Yeah. I mean, of course, based on what I mentioned earlier, I love the Flipster versus Diesel matchup. But if Flipster is playing with a bad computer or something, then that might be a tough one for him. Definitely a rude awakening to have to play Diesel in Week 1. And yeah, the French derby, I've less of an idea how that one's going to go. But definitely, I think, they're both newcomers. So Yeah, could really go either way. Super interesting match. And then yeah, I guess Steal the Snake against Paulinho is another interesting one for me because you mentioned how Paulinho has kind of been sort of just in Division 3, but kind of consistently quite strong. So that's a matchup between two players I think could challenge for promotion, but maybe aren't like top favorites for me. So definitely a super important game.
And we've got a lot of veteran games against each other here. As you said, Steal the Snick Paulinho, Freckles against Hugo, and closed against Pastek as well at this point. And Division 3 was incredibly close in the midfield last season. Steal the Snick finished 4th with 23 points, and Closed finished 8th with 20 points. And between those, we had Freckles, Hugo, and Paulinho. So all of those were very close to each other last season, and we may well be in for another season that might be as close. And then we had Pastek, who was 9 points below Closed in 10th place. So yeah, as I said, he's going to have to put in some effort, but he definitely can fight for those, at least midfield spots as well. It'll just, depend on how he does on those specific countries and how much effort he actually puts in this season. All right, let's move over to our penultimate division here, Division 2, where, again, we've got a lot of familiar faces here, but mostly familiar faces not really from Division 2 last season, because we've got 12 players here and only 5 of them competed in Division 2 last season. We've got the relegated Verdok, 3 promoted players in Armor, WTF, and Bootbot, and 3 newcomers in Samoti, Aston, and Stock.
Yeah, again, not really sure at all how the newcomers are going to fare here. I would guess that I feel like the reason I said that I think the newcomers might struggle in higher divisions is just because I feel like maybe the preseason field is like a little bit softer than like the established field, so it might be tough. Like they might find the competition a little bit higher, but they could totally prove me wrong because they're really wild cards. And yeah, speaking of insane seasons last season, you were talking about Diesel in Division 4. It was so Armand in Division 3 last season. I mean, I think he had 2 extra weeks to do it, but he finished with 34 points, which is also just completely insane. And I think at the start of that season, I said, I was like, I'm like, Armand is like a heavy favorite for me. Like he's really good because I'd seen his quality in other tournaments and he absolutely proved that. So again, I consider him a favorite for sure for this division. He's just such a good player. Could easily see him in Division 1. And another interesting one is Verdok because he's been, in my memory, kind of just sort of floating in between Division 1 and 2. So definitely kind of on the border there, but tons of quality as well. So could definitely see him pushing promotion too. And then, yeah, otherwise, yeah, not much more to say, but another really good division.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with most of what you said. Especially here with the newcomers. I mean, I've known Aston for a pretty long time. To me, he always like struck me more as like a no-moving player. And I've never heard of Samoti or Stock before this preseason, so I really don't know what to expect of them. They did very well in preseason, of course. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they'll be able to come up with against the more established players. Yeah, especially looking at the promotion race, as you said, will be very interesting. Armand, of course, with his fantastic season last season. Definitely one of the favorites. I also think that Max could be in for a shout. He had, again, a pretty solid season last season, kind of a second in a row. Not quite getting to the promotion spots yet, but might be good for him this season. He's got Finland as his home country in week 1, so he might be off to a good start. And just overall, I feel like he's got what it takes to at least fight for the promotion spots. For sure, Verdok will be an interesting one as well. Definitely, on paper, I think probably the second strongest player in this division, purely based on the game mode that we're playing, which is, very specific maps in a specific time that I think he's very good at. But yeah, he's been in Division 1 for a while, so we'll see how he does in a promotion battle. But yeah, even without those, Clyde or Cameron could be very good as well, fighting for those promotion spots. Boop Bop might be interesting. Renata basically got to that promotion spot last season and then didn't play any of her playoff games. So she could have gotten promoted last season if she had played any of them. So yeah, and then there's some more wild card players who might not be quite at that level, but if they get a good run going, Odboka, Guelo, WTF, we might see them fighting for those spots as well, or at least taking some points off the favorites, which could be interesting as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Let's look at who they are facing in week 1. And, well, Clyde, not the best start, I'm assuming, going up against Max in his home country. Not really what you want to hope for. Other than that, yeah, the 2 newcomers, Samo against Aston and Guelo against Stock, could also be a pretty interesting matchup, I think.
Yeah, that's just unfortunate for Clyde/Cameron. It's the kind of thing where you see the schedule at the start of the season and the fixtures aren't out yet, and you're just like, please do not put me against Max in Finland. And he was the guy who got unlucky. So yeah, going to be a tough start for him, almost certainly. But anything can happen. And yeah, as you mentioned, Samo against Aston. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Is a very, very interesting one as well. Them both newcomers. Yeah, that's correct. And also Verdok against Renata is really interesting to me because, especially you mentioned Renata was like really, really strong for basically the entirety of last season, and then had that thing where she just stopped playing at the end for some reason. I want to say she also didn't play like the last regular season leg, although I'm not sure if that's correct.
I think
but
she
in any
did,
case,
but yeah, I'm not 100% sure anymore.
Okay. Yeah, in any case, definitely showed she has a lot of quality. And if she can actually, stick to the games and play them all this season, also a contender. But of course, Verdok, as we mentioned, super strong as well, so that could go either way.
Yeah, I just looked it up, by the way. She missed 1 game early on in the season in week 4, but then played all of them up until the playoffs. Yeah, definitely some interesting games here as well. And now is the time to move on to our Division 1, the last division we've got for you today. And that is now a whole lot more interesting, with Boxer being banned, Raidman not returning, and Orpheus also not returning. This is all suddenly extremely wide in the open.
I absolutely love this division. Like, I have no idea what's going to happen, and it's great. Like, because before it was like Boxer and Raidman were basically locks for the playoffs, and then Orpheus was like almost a sure thing as well. And then with everyone gone, it's like I have no clue what's going to happen here. I mean, like Nimrif, I think on paper I'd say Nimrif is a favorite, but I think it was you who mentioned before that he is focusing a lot on school and maybe he doesn't have as much time to practice this season.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I don't know, Pluki, I guess, is probably a favorite to finish top 4 if he's able to practice as much as he has in the last few seasons. And then probably you are a favorite here. For me, Mr. Blue maybe has always been a good player. But I don't know. I mean, Shumi as well is definitely into the shout, or Barry Fishy Bear, the 2 promoted players. But literally, I could see this going anywhere. Like there are players where I could see them finishing in 1st. I could see them finishing in 10th. I have no idea, but I am so excited to see how this plays out.
Yeah, I think you said it well there. Like, quite literally anyone could place in any position, and I wouldn't be too surprised. And absolutely anything can happen in this division. We've got 3 newcomers. We've got Bastel, who I have memories of, back when he wasn't even really in the community yet, I think. And just, the duels game mode and stuff like that had just been introduced. I played against him like twice in a weekend series or something like that and lost both times. So great memories there. Toto Radio is also a very, very good player. I don't know I've known Mason for a long time around the community, but I've never actually really seen him play. So that's also going to be interesting to see how he'll do. And yeah, for the established players, Pluki was the sort of the 4th wheel in the playoffs last season who did manage to make it there, But obviously, against the, Raymond Box and Orpheus, there wasn't really much to win for him there. And he made it there with 14 points, which was 3 points more than me, who finished ninth. So that just shows you how close last season already was. And now we're taking out all the players who didn't make it close at the top. I personally don't see myself as too big of a favorite, for the promotion spots. We'll have to see how I do. I'm not too big of a fan of some of the maps this season, and you said it with Division 2, with going up against players in unlucky matchups. You get free guesses. Who's going to go up against Mr. Blue on his map, one city per location? Yep, it's me. And I'm also going to be playing against Nimrith in South America, which probably out of everything is the map I'd least want to play him at, because it won't require that much practice, and he's just an incredibly good player, without having too much practice behind him in any particular map. Let me just look up who I'm playing against in Virginia, just, to make it perfect. Not an American. Okay, never mind. I'm playing against Pluki. That would have been, the cherry on the cake, but I guess Pluki isn't much better than an American on that, to be honest. But we'll see. Yeah, definitely super interesting. Also interesting to see how Shumi and Barry will do now in Division 1. They've been incredibly good as well last season in Division 2 and deservedly got promoted. And yeah, Mr. Blue has said as well that he probably won't be practicing too much, but again, there's plenty of maps this season where that may not be necessary anyway. So yeah, that's going to be interesting. I've also seen Basement play just a lot of random Reddit challenges and just lots of random games in general. So he's definitely also putting in some work on getting better as a player. And yeah, just overall, it's going to be an insane season. And I'm so looking forward to it.
Argument for anyone. It's so great.
Yeah, so let's look at the first week and those fixtures. And we've got 2 Frenchmen against 2 Dutchmen here, in Pluki against Mr. Blue and Nimrith against Baseman, and also our 2 derbies here with Barry against Mason and Bastel against Toto Radio.
Yeah, it's just fitting that the start of this division would have such great fixtures, and we've also got Calamity, our favorite Australian, against Shumi.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I can't really call any of these, honestly. Like, I think Baseman said he's been practicing quite a lot of Finland. I don't think he likes it very much, but he's definitely practicing it. Is Nimrith? I don't know. So the result of that could depend on how much Nimrith is putting into it. Yeah, and then the French derby is really interesting. Them both being newcomers, but obviously very strong players and well established in other places. And then, yeah, the American derby with newly promoted Barry Fishy Bear against newcomer Mason. I might give the edge to Barry Fishy Bear here just because he's so used to the whole Reddit League the format, and just, yeah, it's not a mystery to him. But who knows? I mean, you never know with the newcomers. Mason could surprise us, and yeah, can't wait.
Yeah, and I don't have too much to add about the duels itself. Just generally about Finland, I think is also a country where everything can go wrong so quickly, and it's not something you can practice too much. You're not going to gain too much knowledge about it. Basically, the only thing you'll really learn is smaller city names that you might be able to find quicker. Maybe you'll have a quick look at how the road numbering system works to, that if you find like a 3 or 4 digit road number, that you don't like have to look for it for a minute. But other than that, there's not too much. The landscape looks relatively similar throughout, except for some of the extremes, like the far north looks a bit different from the far south. But if you're in the middle of nowhere in a forest, there could be like a massive radius of like, I don't know, 200 kilometers either way where you can probably find yourself in. And because of that as well, if you do just happen to be in a round where, there's not much information at all, or just, one side, one direction has good information, maybe even very late on, even after you've gone for like 2.5 minutes, and the other just doesn't, it can very easily turn a game around and, see some upsets in there. So definitely an interesting map as well for a first week here. Have you practiced any Finland yet? What do you think about it?
Not at all yet. I mean, I guess I'm kind of glad that there's probably not too much to practice. Again, just getting used to the general feel and getting used to the road numbering system maybe, but otherwise, basically I don't have many opinions because I'm procrastinating with Reddit League as usual. So
Yeah.
I have not done a lot of Finland yet, but I don't particularly love it from the rounds I've played before, so it could be a tough one, but we'll see.
All right. Yeah. We'll see then how you and everyone else does in this week. And yeah, that's it for this week of the Reddit League show. Thanks everyone for watching. We hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you guys again next week. Till then, bye.
Thanks everyone. Later.